Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Array Crew Below the Line FYC conversation. My name is Marcus Jones, and I'm the awards editor, TV and film at IndieWire. Before we get started with our amazing panel, I wanted to first offer a quick reminder about Array Crew. Array Crew is the below the line hiring database founded by filmmaker Ava DuVernay with a special focus on the amplification of women, people of color, and other underrepresented film and TV professionals. Membership is free to anyone 18 years of age and older with at least one verifiable production credit. Array Crew is supported by every major studio and streamer in Hollywood. Array Crew members have received a total of 64 Primetime Emmy Award nominations this year. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by 9 of those nominees. Allow me to introduce you all to Nina Ruscio, nominated for her production design work on The Flight Attendant, Inaya Yusuf, nominated for her picture editing work on the doc Lucy and Desi, Addie Manis, nominated for her special visual effects work on Foundation, Kate Biscoe, nominated for Outstanding Prosthetic Makeup for Angeline, Carmen Cuba, nominated for Outstanding Casting for a Drama Series, Stranger Things, Lawrence Davis, nominated for his hairstyling work on period piece The First Lady, Steve Olson, nominated for Outstanding Production Design for a variety special for Live in Front of a Studio Audience, Pauline Edwards, nominated for her cinematography work on RuPaul's Drag Race, and finally, Michelle Cole, who was nominated for Outstanding Contemporary Costumes, Blackish. How's everyone doing? Congratulations on your nominations.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I wanted to start this off by asking, is the celebrated work you do now something you always felt inclined toward doing, or did any of you have a really kind of winding path towards the work you do today?
I have a son who's entering college this fall, so that meant that last year was a lot of talking about sort of like, how did you become who you are? How did you know what to study? And the truth is that I can only look back at my life and see the through line, but while I was in it, it wasn't as identifiable as it might seem. I started out studying journalism, but before that, I was part of, thanks to my mom, sort of initiating a love of the arts. I was part of one of of only 3 bilingual theater companies in the country. And in that company, I did everything and I was a kid. There were only 3 people who were kids and the rest were adults. So we were sort of treated, we had to do everything that the adults did. And in that, it was a repertory company. So you had to learn how to do lights. You had to learn how to do, stage managing. You had to do makeup, and also you were on stage. So at that point, I learned collaboration, and I learned, I had a deep affinity for the arts, especially connected to, for me, to my father. I speak Spanish, so it was in Spanish and English, and that was my experience in the States after I moved here from Peru with my American mom. And then I studied journalism because I knew I sort of had a love of story and of people, but I needed to have a real job and couldn't really go into theater. So but from there I just sort of I worked on Univision as a field reporter for a couple of years. Had no intention of being on camera, so that wasn't sort of the most comfortable for me. But from there I went into documentary, film and TV, and then that sort of became reality TV back in those days, and that didn't feel like the right thing for me. And someone said I should meet with this casting director in features. So at that point in my life, I was very good at listening to people that I respected who seemed like they understood their own path. And so I said yes to that. I met with her and started working for her and found a love for it that way. And once I went out on my own, I was able to shape more obviously the direction that I took that, which combines still my love for documentary film and for just humans and stories. And that's my winding path. That doesn't seem that winding, I don't think, but it definitely was.
How about you, Michelle? Were you always drawn to sort of costumes and clothes?
Yes, at a really very early age, probably 13 or 14 years old. My stepmother was a drama teacher in Los Angeles at a high school, Marshall High School. So I started there doing sets and painting sets, and got into costume. Probably at 16, I realized when I saw My Fair Lady, the movie with Audrey Hepburn, that I told my dad that I wanted to be a costume designer, and he was very both my parents were very involved, and I started taking sewing classes and tailoring in high school, and then went off to college and majored in theater and did plays. And when I got out of college, I started doing. That's when I'm dating myself. When I started doing MTV and all those kind of in commercials back in the day, the Pepsis and with Whitney Houston. So I started as like third or fourth assistant, and then my first landed TV job was with David Hasselhoff when he was Snapper on Young and the Restless. So I started in the workroom and worked my way up from there. And then I got a phone call from In Living Color from Keenan Ivory Wayans to do that. That was my first union job. And then I've been a designer for 32 years. And now Blackish is my show now, and Grownish. So I'm on those two.
With it being the final season of Blackish, did that like open the door at all to any sort of difference? Like, yay, I can be more daring, or I can try some looks that have been on the back burner?
No, I'm just so, I'm honored to be nominated, and it's such a great special feeling. So I'm just enjoying that right now. I didn't really think like, oh, what am I going to get jobs? Am I going to do this? And I'm just enjoying each and every day and each and every moment of it, because these nominations don't come often. So it is it's a blessing to be here. So I'm really happy.
I think one of the great things we have with this panel is that you all represent projects that look at the past, the present, and future. What are the joys and challenges of, say, working in the past? Lawrence, we can start with you.
I think with me, one of the joys are basically discovering things that I didn't know about. Doing the research and just digging deep into what was relevant then and what is period appropriate has taken me through a lot of different eras. I think most of what I discover is that a lot of period stuff is still around us. When we're out on location, we can stand in front of a building that none of us paid attention to until the 1930s outfits and the hair and the cars are put in front of that building, and the building comes alive. So it's the past that I'm fascinated by.
I was wondering too, which period took sort of the most research? Because I could see the Obama portions of the show being more difficult because there was more of a breadth of hairstyles in the 2010s versus kind of a very clear look in Roosevelt.
I think my most challenging was young Betty Ford, the 30s. It was beautiful, but yet I think that there were some things that I had to determine if they looked period appropriate with some of the hats, some of the costumes, as well as, for instance, young Betty had a dance class, and I wanted to make a simple bun look period appropriate for the 30s and not look too contemporary. So little things like that can be a challenge, and I think it's all in my head. Sometimes I just have to step back and let it go and let it do its thing. But just little nuances like that can, to me, create a challenge. And it's just as simple as just letting it go and let it do its own thing.
Steve, I wanted to go to you because you're in this interesting place where you're revisiting the past and even maybe recreating it. So did you feel like you got a chance to remix these classic sets at all, or was it kind of focused on like rebuilding it to a T of what it was like back then?
Well, yeah, the first goal is to try to rebuild it to a T. I mean, they really want to feel like they're stepping into that set. But it really is the set that we remember that we're trying to recreate, because the actual sets were probably pretty worn and torn and kind of simplistic, and they were done before high def. so the finishes were not as detailed. And so there's an additional challenge to kind of bring it to life in like a grander way without increasing the elements. So my finishes, I think, were a little bit cleaner and everything kind of shined, but that also had to do with the fact that it was kind of a unique production in that, you know, these kids' roles were being played by adults. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't really, it was sort of more presentational in a way. So we were allowed to kind of enhance it and make it just feel better. And it was another thing that that Brent Miller talked about, and that is, you know, we had been through a year and a half of COVID, and they didn't want to do like a very important episode of All in the Family or something. They wanted to do something that was more fun. So that being said, we kind of livened everything up and made it feel a little bit more sparkly. And it is a live event. It's a, you know, it's a there's 2 different shows happening in the night, and studio audience there, and Norman Lear's there, and so there's a lot of sort of presentational quality to the show.
Nina, getting into the present with the flight attendant, what was it like sort of to both have this kind of international story, but also with this main character that has sort of such an internal journey that she's going through that we actually see sort of a physical form of with this mind palace? And so what were the challenges there, sort of balancing capturing what the world looks like now versus like capturing specifically Kaylee's characters?
Well, that was incredibly attractive for me to participate in the project, because essentially the Mind Palace needed to sustain an entire season worth of interest and unfoldings and events that take place there. The idea that she is there with 5 or 6 of her personalities became this treat for me to create metaphoric ways to tell the story in the space. Her journey to sobriety and the seduction that we had set up. I'd set up the bar in such a way that you were physically compelled to go there. You couldn't avoid going there. If you look throughout the set, it metaphorically echoes her multiplicity of personalities and the journey that she's in. There's portals everywhere that you go through. There's the physical axis of the journey of the space. Literally, she's going through portals to get to or to avoid the bar. There were fire elements and water elements and all the aspects of a self that could be split apart. I'd set up so many different aesthetics of twinning and doubling in that set. There's a lot of book matched marble to sort of express the twinning of a self. For me, the engaging metaphor of the season and the psychological work that she's doing in that space motivated us to come up with something that can sustain our interest for that long and unfold and be shape-shifting. Become a waterfall element, become magical realism elements throughout the season. So it was a spectacular anchor upon which to design.
And then, of course, talking about the future, Addie, what were the challenges with Foundation? Because, of course, we both see this sort of future that's very technological, but also like this idea of an apocalypse that kind of cycles back into like a much more like dustier world. And so what was it like sort of capturing these 2 versions of the future, I guess, this long timeline?
I mean, the challenges on Foundation included scope and scale for sure. We have multiple worlds and in some instances, multiple timelines. With anything with sci-fi, I think we're steeped in it constantly as viewers. So there's always a challenge to try to like embed in the familiar. We want to embed in art history. We want to embed a little bit in astrological science, astronomical science, but also present something that you haven't seen before. Otherwise it's boring to a viewer. So I mean, we worked hand in hand with production design. I think a project like this that's so driven by the appearance, visual effects and production design and locations are really like completely interlocked as one large scale team. We tried it very hard in the pre-production process to just set looks for each planet or each environment. So like we have Synax is a planet where our main character Gail comes from, and that is one of the most beautiful locations, which stands a little bit in narrative contrast to the fact that that's a society that commits a genocide. So there's like an ugly and a beautiful together. And it's also a planet that becomes completely devolved by global warming. So sort of following that trajectory visually in the locations, you know, in the set design, in the costumes, it all hooks together. And then, you know, we multiply that across like 8 or 12 key locations. There's one of the larger challenges was the planet of Trantor, where our like main empire is based, and it's where a robot character lives. And there's this epic act of terrorism in the first episode that wreaks like destruction across a whole city. But that digital set, you know, is heavily shot on stage and is otherwise completely digital. It contained some sort of nonsensical elements that don't live in reality. Like it's a city planet, which already is a thing that doesn't exist. It's a city planet built in multiple layers. So it goes 50 levels deep. Each level needed to have a look. And like, you know, when you start thinking about that, you think that, well, that doesn't make any sense. How would you even build that? That, you know, there's, at one point we see an explosion through ceiling panels in the sky, which is just visually nonsensical. So you spend many months sort of like, you sketch it, you paint it, you think like, okay, what are the physics of this? What makes sense to the human brain? So I think it was, the biggest challenge was a mix of designing sort of that magnitude of unique looks and progressions, and also dealing with things that aren't based in earth-based physics, that, you know, we want to present them in a way where the audience believes them, even though they're in very fantastical setups.
Yeah, and Foundation being a literary adaptation, were you sort of looking towards more of the book for inspiration, or was there at all like a sense of let's update this a bit because we have a better sense of what our future could be if we're trying to keep a realistic element to it?
A mix of both. Isaac Asimov is so integral to 20th Century Foundation. He predates, you know, Foundation predates many of our modern franchises. It's, in some ways, it's baked into some of our modern franchises. So you have an interesting conundrum of, we're going to present the source material, but it's going to feel derivative because now we've seen it in other shows. But you can't, you know, you go back to the canon of 20th century literature, but then you're also dealing with 20th century cinema. So we reference everything. We reference Star Wars, we reference Star Trek. In some ways you say, well, we want to differentiate, but you have to look at the source to know that you're differentiating. We consulted with NASA and JPL in some instances about space dynamics to get sort of a scientific, like, well, how would a moon look in this system? Like, what do we think the gravity around a black hole would behave like, even though we don't really know, but we have some estimates. So you do try to use the breaking science. And then it goes back to like, how do we think light behaves in a lens, in like an infinite darkness? It can be quite hypothetical, but yeah, I mean, there are certainly key elements of Asimov that we very much wanted to be true to. We wanted to be true to the robot. We wanted to be true to the, you know, the space tether, which is sort of infamously impossible to depict. The geometry and the physics of it is like impossible to film. So we did a lot of visualization to try, like, how would we convey this? And that's all very much in a spirit of authenticity. But, you know, we also used a lot of Christopher Nolan as reference. You know, we took like Interstellar as sort of a gritty, grounded visual reference. So a mixed bag. You try to be a little forward thinking and a little referencing to history at the same time.
Nice. And then going from future back to reality in the doc space. And I am Pauline. I wanted to ask, working in this space where you're taking in all this footage or these archives, do you know kind of immediately when you found a moment, like something that's definitely going to make it? Or is it a lot of kind of trying to take in everything, all the footage you're getting, and then assessing what will make the final cut later?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't really know what they're going to pick for the final cut. We show up and we film them starting their transformation into a drag queen, and then after that, then they you know, they could do an acting challenge, they could do a dancing challenge. My favorite is when they have to lip sync against each other, and you just don't have any idea what they're gonna do. They're big, their personalities are huge, and you just want to be able to, just capture what they're giving us and put it out, and just do it organically. And so nothing is really like set up. They have their challenges, and then they have to achieve those. So it's very, I work in scripted, and it just keeps you on your toes, because everything is happening in a moment. So you can't miss it. You have to really learn to anticipate and listen to story.
The reason why I asked that too is like Drag Race has so solidified itself as a brand. And so I was wondering as well, like, do you kind of see the final product in your head at all while shooting the show? Like if you get sort of a contestant looking a certain way, like maybe a side eye, do you hear kind of that like rattle effect that has become iconic in your head while shooting it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of edit in our heads and see, like, I think this is gonna make it. Like you caught that look, or you caught that split, or you just, it's just so spontaneous that just to be able to just capture them in all these different elements that they really do a lot. So to be able to capture it all is pretty cool,
Yeah. And then just to go back to the earlier question for Inaya, like you really are getting all this footage coming in. Like, are you able to sort of like quickly edit it in your head, or do you have to kind of assess everything in front of you and then start making the cuts?
Yeah, I think our process really is going through everything, and we were pretty blessed with the amount of archive we have of Lucy and Desi in general. Like they have an immense archive out there that are readily available publicly, but at the same time, we had the privilege of having access to their personal archives, all the tapes, all the photographs, all the family gems that otherwise people were not exposed to. So we really took advantage of seeing both the public and private lives of Desi and Lucy. And I think that was the biggest point of reference, is really staying true to these two individuals who have really a public and private persona. And I think that the goal was really to paint a bigger picture of who they are beyond who the public knows of them, but also to accentuate more than make them three-dimensional rather than stay in the flat two-dimensional Lucy and Desi that we see on I Love Lucy, for example. So yeah, I think we really assessed like everything from the shows, the family archives, and also the readily available archives that are out there. So I think that was a mixture really of finding the gems in each and every aspect of the archives.
Yeah, and Lucy and Desi is a project directed by Amy Poehler. I was wondering, what was it like working with a director that's actually used to being edited?
I can't speak to that can't answer that myself. I think what I do know is that Amy has a very clear vision of what she wants to do with the project, and together with our main editor, Robert, and our writer, Mark Monroe, they were able to really find the story and the meaning behind these two characters.
Carmen, I wanted to go back to you because with each new season of Stranger Things, I've personally felt like you've found actors that really understand the assignment. And so what has it been like to see the world fall in love with Joseph Quinn so quickly? And then opening it up to everyone else, did you all have any moments on your projects this season where you were like, yes, I nailed it?
By the way, I just wanted to say before I answer that listening to all of you guys speak is what is like exactly what I love the most about what we do. Everyone is so smart and so connected and passionate about what they do and so specific. And I feel like the Creative Arts Emmys are the most interesting because of these people that come together to pursue these things so specifically and so passionately with such intelligence. Anyway, that aside, yeah, it's amazing to watch people fall in love with your characters. I fall in love with them. The actors that come to do it, once each season happens, you know, there's a bigger audience of people who love it, but there are also actors who fall in love with the story and the characters. And actually it's very helpful to have such awareness of the show, because then they come in understanding the assignment. Like you said, they understand the tone. Even Jamie Campbell Bower, for example, he did scenes from Primal Fear and Hellraiser as his audition, because we couldn't give away at all what that part was. So, you know, even being able to come in and do scenes from these completely different shows, but knowing you're doing it for Stranger Things, you know, it's somehow he gave it the tone of Stranger Things on those two very different scenes. So it's helpful, and it's really actually it's thrilling to watch. And we did this during the pandemic, so it was also, you know, very it was a very good distraction. But everyone that comes to this show has to be their own, really, there has to be a real specificity to them that is separate from anyone else on the show. And I think we've been very lucky in that regard.
Yeah. I wanted to throw it to you, Kate, as well, because it was a situation where when the project was announced, it was like, how is Emmy going to transform into this iconic Los Angeles kind of personality? And then when we saw like the actual photos and the look that you did for Angeline, it was like, wow, like you guys actually put this together. And so what was that like, sort of figuring out and then seeing this big reaction to it?
Well, it was daunting. In our initial meetings, you know, we started this in the beginning of 2019. So we've been on it for a long time. Of course, went down for the pandemic and came back. Lucy Cherniak, the director, Emmy Rossum, and me, who met in the very beginning, and we all had the same ideas about it, really, which was what I liked about it was that it wasn't going to be trying to present the truth or trying to expose Angeline. It was presenting many different points of views and versions of what could be the truth, because in reality is everyone has their own truth. And what I really liked about it was the themes of you don't have to be what society dictates, and you don't have to be what you are born to be. You are in charge of your own destiny, and you can do whatever you want with it. And there was lots of elements of you know, magical realism, which I think it was Nina that was talking about, which I really liked about it too, because it did lend to, all right, we are able to create our own realities. It was empowering, and it's a good theme to be sending, you know, during these times. None of us had done anything like this before. And Vincent, who was my prosthetics partner, he came on board, and, you know, kind of just like the Musketeers, we're all like, all right, none of us have done this, but failure is not an option. And here we are.
Yeah.
So there was mountains beyond mountains, you know, who knew all of the things that were going to happen between now and then, but we all made it, and here we are.
Yeah.
In terms of doing the prosthetics, you know, it was going to be something that Emmy had never experienced before, Emmy Rossum. You know, she was on Shameless, where she wore, you know, little to no makeup for a long, long time. So this, you know, and our longest makeup was about 5 hours. So that's 5 hours of her getting put into her oldest age makeup, which was 13 different pieces. So forehead, nose, cheeks, chin, upper lip, lower lip, earlobes, arms, hands, chest, neck,
Yeah.
and then wig, costume, and then her day starts. So a lot of it was pacing and figuring out, what works. We're never going to make her look exactly like Angeline, but we were definitely going to make her not look like Emmy Rossum.
And I imagine too that like the other daunting part of it is that Angeline, of course, is such a character, but this is a real life person. And so with the prosthetics, I imagine you wanted it to capture Angeline's essence, but also not look like a real person still, not like.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing it's very meta in a way, because you're putting inorganic material on a living human being in order to make her look like somebody else. However, the person that your actor is portraying has put inorganic material in herself in order to look like someone else and to not look like who she used to be. So it was definitely a balancing act of trying to get all of that subtext to read to the audience.
But again, this is a celebration. So if anyone else has a moment where they feel like they nailed it, I would love to hear it about this season.
It was pretty exciting when the last remaining living cast member of Different Strokes, as Todd Bridges, came on the set, and had to have him sort of walk through the set in awe and like go back. You could just see him go back in his mind. And then we went into their bedroom. He's like, oh, I had that bunk bed in my own house too. And it was pretty amazing. And also the gals from Facts of Life, 3 of the original gals were on the set, and they walked through the set and they were going up the stairs and just checking it out. They were really, I think, thrilled to be back in there. So that was kind of a great moment. We also had some camera guys on our show who were on the original shows, whatever that was, 30 something years ago. And they came up to me and said, you nailed it. You really got it. So that was a fun moment.
That's amazing. But I guess on the flip side, like, what is maybe something that was like an unexpected challenge this season? And how did any of you address it? I guess, how about you, Pauline?
The production team, they come up with all these different, different ways to make the show fresh. So, they had a gold chocolate bar kind of scenario where, there would be 2 people and one might get eliminated, but they have this, if they open up this chocolate bar and it's a gold bar, then they get to stay, or they get, so I think the production team just keeping the show just lively, and you never know what to expect, because it's not like some shows just have like, this formula, and I think they switch it up to make things a lot more interesting. And I guess that's why the show has done so good over the years. I'm a camera operator, so there's just so many more elements to the show besides like once I film it and they get it and whatever they do with it. By the time you watch it on TV, you're like, oh, I didn't even see that this was the way it was gonna go. So it's, working on that show is it's fresh. So that's why I really like it.
Yeah. And how about you, Lawrence? Any unexpected challenges on the First Lady?
I would say the show was so huge. What happened with me is that the amount of work that it took in the first block, which was the Betty Ford block, we went from young Betty to Betty's time in the White House, and then past that. So we went from the 30s through the late 70s. And with that, there was constant rotation and prep for the next decade, next decade after that. So the challenges that I ran into was, I'm a hairstylist who likes to be on set to watch my work, but we're constantly prepping people every day for the next scene, not only the next scene, but the next episode. That there was a flow of actors coming through that I never got to go to set. So for me, not being on set to watch my work created a challenge. And if you knew, well, maybe you didn't know, but that show was so big that in order for the next block to happen, I suggested to production that they hire another hair department head for the Obama block.
Mhm.
And then there was another hair department head for the Eleanor Roosevelt block. So it was that huge of a show that in order to prep the next block, there had to be additional hairstylists, department heads in those places while we were filming the first block. So that worked out after a few weeks, but it definitely was a challenging show to do because of the amount of periods that we covered.
As we're coming a little bit towards the end, I wanted to ask a question that's open to everyone. In the spirit of Array Crew, which is about collaboration, inclusion, what do you all look for in a collaborator, especially one that you are hiring or bringing onto a project with you? I can bring that over to Nina.
I actually really love the fact that our workspace is a learning environment. Someone was talking about, we've never done this before, but in fact, actually every single thing that we do, every single thing that all of us do, nobody's ever done it before. So like those constellation of ingredients are only exist in the specifics of the job that you're on. And because of that, an inquisitive spirit, a resourceful approach to projects, a non-confining way of looking at everything, whether it's research or whether it's I'm talking about for people that are starting in the business, whether it's research or whether it's just the way that you're able to really listen and really absorb what's happening around you. When I'm looking for new people, I look for that because in fact, actually, yes, it's great if they have certain skill sets and those are really essential in the art department. And so that's like a baseline. But the other part of it is the willingness to be awake and the willingness to always be aware and be ready and game, because you don't have to come in at it. No one should feel like they're posers. We're all kind of posers. Nobody's ever done the job before that you're doing. So every minute when I take out a blank piece of paper, every minute that someone is looking for some tile or something like that, or trying to pick a color, all of those moments are new. So I look for people that are game.
Visual effects is a field that requires hundreds, if not thousands of people. So there's a lot of hiring going on. There's pre-production, there's on set, there's the global teams, there's the post-production team. But I think like something that I look for in the people that I work for and the people that I hire is like that collaborative spirit and the willingness to listen to and really help the person standing next to you. I think all filmmaking, but visual effects in my arena is very much a team sport. And I don't like to subscribe to a competitive attitude. I don't like people feeling pitched against each other. I don't like people feeling like they have to outperform each other in order to get ahead. I really think that the best work is done when we're like actively helping the person standing next to us. I think the project benefits and every individual person also individually benefits. So I agree completely with everything that Nina said. And really, like, I don't like somebody who's out for themselves, and I don't like to work for those people, and I don't like to hire them. So I try to go where I can try to help to create an atmosphere of we're all working to like lift each other together, because I don't think any of us can like create these projects that we create unless we have entire departments and entire teams that are working like very productively together. And so anything that we can do to like minimize hostility, minimize competition, we all win together, we all hit the finish line together.
And I think that collaboration can extend to on-screen talent as well. And so I was wondering, Carmen, sort of where that impacts your work, finding these actors.
I think it definitely is still all of those things that we talk about with crew. It's still the same with actors. It's a generosity of spirit. It's a curiosity. It's a passion for what you're doing and an ability to be flexible. We sent out these sides for Primal Fear and Hellraiser, and instead of, maybe over analyzing that, just sort of being free and putting your own twist on something and not being afraid to get it wrong, and trusting in the talent that you do have, and trusting also that we on this side can see through sort of the things you might get caught up on, especially in these days. You know, it's like, I understand the anxiety that this process is, with COVID especially, has created. But the truth is that I think, you know, an audition where somebody has really just given it their all and tried something, even if it's not exactly what it is, far supersedes if you have a ring light or if you're, you know, in your kitchen.
Yeah. Lawrence and Kate, you guys are spending a lot of hours with talent and working with this team. What do you all have to keep in mind when you are like working these long hours in building a team for that?
You know, when I was first starting out, somebody gave me really great advice, and this is always how I've chosen my jobs when I have been in the position to be able to choose a job. She said, keep in mind that your time is important, and it's the experience of the job. It's not the end result necessarily, because you're going to be on a job for 2 to 6 months, and that is your time. That is your experience. So you want to make sure that that is what's important to you, and that you're surrounded by people that you like, and think about keeping your mind open, and see how much you can learn from everyone around you. And so that's always how I've tried to approach my jobs, not by what the job could be, but more about how am I going to spend the next 6 months of my life, and who do I want to spend it with, and what do I want to be doing? How do I want to be feeling? So definitely I'd like to have a space where everybody is open-minded and we can all learn from each other. And I'm not always the boss. I mean, the thing with being a makeup artist is that sometimes I can be a department head, sometimes I can be a personal, sometimes I'll be working background with 15 other people. And I like doing that because then I get to meet other people and I get to meet newcomers and I learn all the new cool stuff. But then I also keep in mind who I think I might like to work with in the future. And it keeps me on my toes. And we all share with each other. So that's kind of the environment that I like to create. And I also like people to understand with the project that we're working on, what kind of message are we sending to an audience? I think that's very important too. Like, what is the meaning that we want people to get from the project that we're doing? And how do we send a really good message and theme to the people across, you know, the states or, you know, the world, who's going to be watching this? So I think that's kind of how I feel about it.
I agree as well, because with me, I think it's important to have the right team so that you have the right feel in the trailer. I think that one thing I like to do is I have everybody on my team watch what everybody else does, because you never know when something may happen where someone can't be there, but you always want your actor to be comfortable with who's behind the chair, whether it's myself, my key, or my third. I just want everybody to keep their eyes open and look at what's going on so that everybody can step up to what's necessary and take over it if necessary, and be able to complete the job and have everybody satisfied.
Yeah, definitely. As we come to a close, the one thing I wanted to also ask, just in terms of thinking about the theme of inclusion, and maybe this can go to Inaya, what sort of helps you all feel like you can maybe bring your whole self to work and sort of find or develop that nurturing environment in sort of this entertainment space?
Yeah, I think this goes along well with your previous question too. It's about, you know, having and looking for this environment that is open to your growth as a professionally and personally. And you know, I think that goes without saying that you want to have coworkers and collaborators who are there with you and in it together, you know, so that you can do the best you can and bring your best foot forward while other people are able to do the same. And I think with that is like a lot of loyalty, trust, the ability for team building, And I think that that type of environment, when you are able to find it and when you are able to experience it, I think really helps you with your productivity in general, with the way you see things in post-production. And especially since we were talking earlier about working late hours and working long hours, you are in this with the entire team, and having that spirit of collaboration and having that ability to rely on each other whenever it's needed is very important. And just looking back at Lucy and Desi, for example, like, and the way they run their production, it was really like a family spirit where people can bring their talent, whichever department they are in, together and really create something special. And everyone was really celebrated in their own way. And it really takes a team, an entire crew to like make something amazing and something worthwhile. So I think when I'm looking at a project, as someone said, it was really about looking for that experience and being present with that experience.
Can I speak a little bit to of what Inaya was just saying about family atmosphere? So it took us 2.5 years to make the first season of Foundation, which is a very long time to be on a project. I had a baby during that. So like in terms, and I was not the only one, I was the first one, and then a series of other people got pregnant and started families while we were making it. And I was able to do that and stay with the show because of the support of the crew that I worked directly with, the companies that I worked directly with. The showrunner was incredibly supportive. Skydance and Apple, it went all the way up to Skydance and Apple, like orchestrating maternity leaves and hiring, secondary department heads. Like Lawrence said, the scale of the project was so big, we needed to like bring in other producers. And, in terms of like fostering that atmosphere that lets people bring their whole selves to work, I think it is a thing of like we got to hire extra people when we need to spread the work around, because these projects go on a very long time and they're very intense, and people get sick and they start families and they have dependents, and like sometimes you can't work 15 hours a day for a stretch because you got to take care of your parents or whatever. And to have our leadership be willing to backstop with additional staff, or a studio exec stepped in for me for a few weeks so that I could take a little bit of leave after my daughter was born. I think that's incredibly important for all kinds of inclusivity, because it's, not everybody is able to work 100 hours a week for years at a time in remote locations. Many of us here have dependents, have families, have like, just bodies that we would like to keep healthy now and again. So I think the more that production and post-production can be inclusive of the whole person and keep a healthy person and a healthy family, the more people will be able to like bring all their talents to the workplace.
Definitely. And with that, we've come to the end of the Array Crew Below the Line FYC conversation. But I want to thank you all so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. I want to once again say thank you to Nina, Inaya, Addie, Kate, Carmen, Lawrence, Steve, Pauline, and Michelle. Congratulations on your Emmy nominations, everyone.